proves we can't ever really know what's going on.
Appearances can be deceptive.
Tom, I was just speculating about a hypothesis. I know I don't know nothing.
Uncertainty. That is appropriate for matters in this world.
There, we're in a tight spot.
Welcome to Framework. This is John, one of the hosts of Framework. And with me today, the other host of Framework, Al. How you doing, sir?
Not bad. You know, I always like doing the Coen-Oscopy episodes.
That's right. We got a live one today. Inside LLEWYN Davis. They're 2013 folk music, failing artist. I don't know. What would you even call this film? It sort of defies easy description. It's about failing as an artist and folk music, I guess. Joining us, returning to the program, one of our favorites, Gwen Sisco. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
You had something immediately interesting to me there, John, talking about like, well, how do you classify this movie? What's its genre? Because it is, it's not really quite a musical. It's almost structured like a music biopic, except it's not about a real person. And more to the point, like it feels anomalous among music movies, even ones that are about fictional musicians, you know, whether it's Almost Famous or The Commitments, whatever. Music movies generally like this, they're more about a rise and fall. And this eschews that. It's a fall and a wallow. There is no rise for LLEWYN Davis.
Yeah, it's not set over a period of time. It is 1 week or so, something like that. A slice of life. The beginning and end certainly suggest it's sort of a cyclical kind of situation for him, and it is episodic. There is no real plot through line. The Coens were saying apparently they realized there was no plot and added the cat. So that's the entire thread that sort of hitches the film together, I guess, which is just, he has a cat that he has to deal with. And he does kind of a shitty job of it. But the rest of it is kind of just one situation to the next. None of them are like especially excessive and they're certainly not linked directly, except sort of by a thematic ennui. I guess you'd say. It is. It feels like you're digging deep into Greenwich Village in the 1970s. I think it's 1970 is the year this takes place in.
No,
it's
1961.
1961.
Excuse me.
Because Dylan's just coming on the scene at the end.
Exactly. Right. So it's not an exact replication of that, though. It's kind of more an emotional version of 1961, what it must have felt like to be this specific figure that, of course, did not exist. It's kind of a comedy, but it's also maybe the most depressing film they've made. Real tough one to categorize here.
Yeah, It's about an emotional winter. Is what more than an emotional Greenwich Village is the way I feel about it. It's one of the most wintry movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, there's some great sweaters in this film.
Yeah, it's less wintry in terms of, you think of holidays and snowstorms. This is just like after the holidays. This is when there's nothing left but dirty slush.
Yes.
That's the vibe.
February. Yeah.
Not a holiday to be seen. You're right. Yeah. This is a winter of discontent solely. But yeah, like that is something that strikes me as, you're right. Is this a comedy? Not really. It certainly doesn't feel that way, even though there are like some funny bits in it.
It's all sort of wry, I guess. Yeah. There's a little bit of a tongue in cheek with everything, but it's also just sad.
But it stands out to me like even among music movies, like this is not. It doesn't strike me as a music movie or as a rock movie. The fictionalized ones, that thing you do, whatever. It feels like a big part of that plot is always wrestling with success, which is one struggle LLEWYN Davis never has to contend with. Even something like I mentioned, The Commitments, like part of the comedy there, it's funny how like they have the like they barely even get to the point of like, I don't think they release a record, but they have a little bit of success with a couple of shows, and it sort of like immediately vaults them through the whole that thing you do process of falling apart, of going to their heads and coming apart at the seams and all of that. And it's kind of funny there how small scale it is and how fast it all goes. But this is something totally different. Like, I don't know, it feels like more of a sad 70s character study than it does a music movie to me.
I think it's very much a music movie, but unlike any of the ones we've seen before, in that the conflict here is not, man versus society or any of those things. It's really just him and himself. Like nothing is specifically standing in the way of his success. And so that's not the drama. It's just about how this is a really, really hard thing to do. And for the vast majority of people, it's not the way it is in the movies. And we actually get to see that here.
It opens with Oscar Isaac as Llewyn Davis performing a song. And I think it is really important that the first thing we realize is that a lack of talent is not his problem. He's really good. He's also, he's Oscar Isaac. He's incredibly hot and like sort of at peak hotness in this film. An incredibly good looking guy. Yeah. So that taken, it does become an immediate issue. Like, well, what's wrong? Why is he not successful? And I would say that this never becomes the crux of the film. That's never actually voiced out loud, but it sort of hangs over everything that happens in the movie. There is sort of a sense you get, especially as the movie continues, and he's dealing with these little picayune issues of living in the city and having no money and being somewhat of an asshole. Like, well, what if this is actually contributing to his failure? And it's sort of like all of it, none of it. At the end of the day, he kind of seems cursed by God. Yeah, the things that go unsaid in this movie are remarkable. Because I said that the fucking stones it takes for the Coens to do this, like to never have anyone reinforce in the dialogue that Llewyn is actually a great musician. Like the whole movie, our whole opinion of this movie hangs on how we view his level of talent in this outdated musical style that not a lot of us in the audience are that familiar with. And it's almost like the Armageddon thing of like, rather than casting a musician and teaching them how to act, they cast an actor and taught him to sing. And they don't even have the common decency to just have the normal like insecurity, to have the gore fiends say, look, you're the best folk band I've ever encountered, like tell it for our sake in the audience. Like they just rely on the music and the performance to do that. And then the fact that opening, you're right, he's obviously so talented and so good looking right out of the gate. And then it has to be about how he's the most talented and good looking person we've ever seen. And he's completely unsuccessful. And also we're not supposed to like him. Like we had to buy all that stuff about him and then not feel like, oh, it's the world doing him unfairly. Like it has to be at least as much Llewyn's fault as the world's. And that is an incredible tightrope to try and walk. And one that if you had like laid it out for me, I would say is functionally impossible to pull off. Yeah, it just strikes me watching it. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to watch this movie now and come at it fresh, because its thesis is so clearly stated by the end. Like, and also because of, I don't know, my life circumstances. I'm sure we'll get into that a little. This hits a nerve for me in a very specific way. Just because, I have attempted to pursue a career in the arts and found it quite difficult. So knowing
I feel
that,
yeah.
It's, I mean, yeah, look, we're both of us here in New York, after the reasons we came here, maybe a little bit. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you on that matter. That's very much the case for me. And knowing all of that and kind of bringing that to it, this becomes that movie, the movie about failing at a career in the arts. And because of that, it undergirds every single thing about this movie. And I'm kind of looking for a through line in it that doesn't involve that, and I can't find it because it's just like the yellow brick road. You know, it's so plainly the emotion this film evokes, and I feel that's probably true for people who don't have my life too.
I think so. I mean, I feel like many of the Coen's films are about losers, you know, and generally speaking, they're usually losers because they're foolish on some level,
Right.
or like they are cursed by God, it feels like, and the universe is just not going to allow them to succeed. And I feel like this is sort of actually interrogating that a little bit more, to be like, it's maybe not about being cursed as much as like success is incredibly arbitrary, and you can be as talented and whatever as you want to be, but it's, you also sort of, I think this is a rare moment in their filmography where it is a little bit of like, you get what you give, and he's not putting out a lot of good aside from his voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that is, I mean, there's several things there to me. Yeah, I think you hit on a really interesting distinction there that, yes, the Coen brothers like losers in their movies, but he stands out for being, the ways he's a loser is not because he's buffoonish.
Right.
The way that a lot of times it is. And so I've been trying, like, as I was like watching this movie, to figure out which of their movies I want to pair it with most strongly. And I can't settle on one. There's too many, like it connects to the others in a lot of different ways. One of them being like, okay, is LLEWYN Moss, that is another character of theirs that is ultimately, you know, takes a big L, you know, big loser, but not because he's stupid, not because he's a buffoon, the way that it is with, you know, their comedies or.
Well,
anything.
their buffoons tend to end up better off than either Llewellyn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other, just that the namings are so close that seems like some sort of, like, they couldn't have been unconscious of that similarity. But
yeah. And the cat is named Ulysses,
right,
which is
so that
taking
ties
us
it
back
to
to
a
a brother where art there. Yeah.
Yeah, and then on the sort of, but is Barton Fink a better comparison point, because they're both about miserable, kind of struggling artists afflicted by John Goodman, who can't quite maintain or like crack mainstream success,
and who have a sense of entitlement about their work. Like, I think that's a lot of what this movie is sort of like, that is his fatal flaw to some extent. I think he thinks he deserves it.
Well, yeah,
I'd say that more of Barton Fink than Llewyn Davis.
Llewyn Davis seems, I mean, a little bit more, used to his rut, I guess. There's already a sense of kind of hopelessness that is set in when we meet him. But
Barton Fink did get some of a taste of the success, and
right.
kind of
that'll do it to you. Yeah,
yeah. He definitely feels immediately that he deserved it and deserves more of it.
The thing is, though, like, if I'm like trying to solve Llewyn's problem here, if I'm going in and being like, okay, so what happens? You know, how does he make it work? What is the thing he's doing wrong that prevents him from succeeding? And I don't think being nicer does the trick in the end of the day.
I have an answer for that, though.
I also have thoughts, but I don't know if I'm jumping the gun if we want to get into the story a little more.
Yeah, maybe a way to get us back to that is I did want to understand, John, you know, you said that by the end of this movie, its thesis about the arts has become so clear. And that's something that I kind of like agree with and disagree with. So I wanted to just see, because I think this is true of a lot of Coen Brothers movies, and this one in particular, and I mean it as a positive thing. I can come out of this movie thinking a couple of very different things about Llewyn Davis and his talents and career prospects and all that. But do you guys come out of this with the same thesis as each other? Like, what did you think that clear thesis was, I guess, in its most banal articulation?
I don't know that I want to say it has a clear thesis exactly. This is I think more this is what it feels like to pursue a career in the arts when it's not working out, is the emotion that this really brings to the front for me, and is unmatched by any other film I've ever seen, because it's not about that narratively at all. Like, there's not much narrative, first off, but there's no big scene. There's the F. Murray Abraham scene. But other than that one moment, really, it's very coy about like putting a finger on, this is about failing in the arts, And I'm also kind of a little taken by surprise by just that they have such facility with this emotion and this state of being, considering that they kind of hit the ground running in their career. They were pretty young when they had their first movie out, and it was very successful, and they never looked back.
That kind of ties back to what I was saying earlier, though. Like, the audacity of you fuckers to make a movie about failing artistically. How would you know?
Yeah.
Where do you get off making a movie about struggling at the arts? You guys hit a grand slam out of the gate.
Fair, but also, like, somebody has to make that movie. Because
no one else has done it.
I as a former starving artist, I am so tired of people winning Oscars and standing up with their trophies being like, all you got to do is dream and you'll make it just like me. And it's like, of course you're saying that, but the fact is most of us never will. So, like, of course, if we want to have a successful movie that tells that story, it's going to be a little bit hypocritical on behalf of the filmmaker, but it is a story I think that is really important to be told, because it is the majority of people.
Yeah, like what I was saying, what makes it so anomalous is that it's a movie about the arts where none of the conflict is about struggling with success. That seems to be built into all these things as like something you're going to deal with eventually, whether it's A Star Is Born or whatever else. And it's doubly surprising to have that somebody finally make that movie about just struggling and never getting to the point of dealing with success, and not have that be like somebody's debut movie, like an outside indie, like, debut is what feels like
16 films into a genius career at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy. And I'm almost surprised this is the story they wanted to tell, like that they came to this. And I imagine it comes from some affection for folk music. I mean, T-Bone Burnett is involved in this film and they're making the soundtrack. They have a relationship with him that has been fruitful over, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and other films, Lady Killers. But there is a love of music that comes out here, and that I imagine must have been part of the attraction.
It seems to me that's the entire attraction.
Yeah.
I mean, listening to them talk about where this story, as much as it is a story, came from, I think they just love folk music. They love working with T-Bone. I think they said they were curious about that sort of period in folk that nobody really talks about between Seeger and Dylan, where stuff was happening, but there weren't a ton of people popping out. And so they wanted to sort of explore that sort of dark period. But other than that, they said they added the cat to give it some plot, because they didn't really have one. So I think this whole thing is like, let's make a movie about Greenwich Village in that period, and we'll figure it out as we go.
I mean, they say that kind of dismissively about adding the cat to the plot. That is actually so effective at tying this together and not having it be just fully episodic, an anthology of scenes. It's like, oh, there's sort of a through line here, a feline through line.
Especially calling the cat Ulysses, and that moment of staring at the Incredible Journey poster. You feel like this is actually maybe the cat's adventure.
But Baby LLEWYN is the cat.
And he's just sort of, the guy who's also there, whose story ends up being told.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to get to the last scene quite yet still, but
but it's the first scene. It's yeah.
Well, but the Bob Dylan cameo doesn't happen in the opening, and
Exactly.
that sort of frames it all as it's the story of this folk scene, and so it's sort of Bob Dylan's story, but this is the guy who happened to be there for it.
I also think they read. I think Dave Von Ronk wrote his memoir or whatever, and I think they were like, "That's a story that no one's told. Let's tell that, but different."
Yeah, I mean, apparently it's an adaptation of that to an extent, but not of Dave Von Ronk, who bears no resemblance to Llewyn Davis in his particulars. But some of the stories are ported over. Yeah,
He's supposed to be a nice person.
Yeah, that's the main thing. But I think they used one of his songs at least, right?
I get a little fuzzy on which ones are original in this, and that's
the essence of folk music to hear. Llewyn Davis tell it.
I know, some are traditional, some are, but I don't think, shoals of herring exist before this movie. That's probably my favorite in the film. We'll get to that scene. Oof.
Yeah.
Okay, let me reset a little bit, you guys. So, you guys love this movie?
No.
Okay.
I think it's very good.
I think it's incredibly well made.
Yeah, it's kind of terrific in its way. This is never going to be a film I love. That's for sure. I struggle with this film. Yeah,
me too. Okay, because I hadn't watched it since the theater. It's not one I had an urge to revisit. I sort of
nope.
There is a strain of film nerd that does cite this as like one of their masterpieces. Maybe not their best, but at the very top tier.
That's like literally true of every single Coen Brothers film except those two bad ones, basically.
And the real perverts who love the man who wasn't there above.
They're out there. They're out there.
Yeah, but those are.
I
you
haven't
gotta watch
rewatched
yourself
that
around
one.
It's better than Al says. It's okay.
It's just.
I liked it when I saw it, but it was 25 years ago.
If you want to tell me that's a very good movie, I'll believe them. If they want to tell me it's the best Coen Brothers movie, all right. Just
fair.
Zip up your skin suit, you freak. No.
I don't see how you could call this better than half their filmography. It's capturing a moment beautifully. The photography and the design are exquisite, but the story is nothing compared to what they often do.
Yeah. And I do think it's a movie that, like, at least all film people, cineasts, should watch once, because, like, kind of like we were talking about earlier, it does something that no other movies we can think of are doing some of these things, and so that gives it value if you're somebody who is interested in the breadth of all film. But yeah, it's a tough hang because the character of Llewyn Davis is a tough hang. I also would say I don't love the look of this movie as much as I love some of the other Coen ones. It's so effective at creating that wintry atmosphere that makes me feel cold to watch it. But it's also kind of unpleasant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. My Letterboxd review of this was like, I need a shower after this. It's it's a rough one for me to get through. Just because, I mean, it's a downer of a story, of course, but it's also just the emotions it's trading in are they're all there's nothing like greatly tragic or really horrifying that happens in this film. It's very slice of life, very ordinary, but it's sort of an accumulative thing where it's all just every scene makes you feel a little worse, it all sort of resolves in a way where you're just like,
without the excitement, like No Country for Old Men is as bleak a movie as ever been made, but that is so watchable to me.
It's a thrilling movie, yes.
Yeah. This one, I think, is really capturing, like, not just ennui, but exhaustion. Like, that, when he says, I'm just really tired. I thought all I needed was a good night's sleep, but it's way more than that. Like, that feeling that I think
you feel that
everybody has been somewhere there at some point, like that. And it's just like that dragged out and out and out.
I feel that way just after 90 minutes of this movie.
It is blessedly quick.
This is But I feel like, man, Llewyn, we've been through some shit here. Like, this sucks. But also, it ties back to A Serious Man for me, because I look at this and go, but what did he really go through? Or like, are these really the trials of Job? Like, he gets gigs. He's pissy about them, but people let him sleep in their apartments, even when he's an asshole to them. Like, I guess this takes us to, there's nothing in this movie that's like super bleak, super tragic. The one thing I would say, or the argument you could make there, is that the F. Murray Abraham scene, I don't see a lot of money here, is arguably there's no more brutal execution in the history of film than that line. I was actually struck this time how like the staging of it's very close to the final confrontation between Carla Jean and Anton Chigurh. But
well, sure.
But also, like that line is so, that's the thing when you're watching 15 of these movies in a row, it starts to or getting Coen pilled. But there's, for as brutal as that line is, and people cite that scene as being so emotionally brutal. Also, what really happens in that scene? He wanders into a famous music club with $1.50 in his pocket, smelling like a bus station, and the owner gives him an audition on the spot and offers him a job on the spot.
Yep.
He gets the big break.
Yeah.
Really. But it's not on exactly the terms he wanted, so he hears it as a suggestion that he might as well kill himself.
The break is basically saying, do you want to be in Peter, Paul, and Mary?
Right.
Well,
which was
he just
a
turns
huge
down
thing.
Yeah. Turns things down every step of the way that would make him money. Yeah. The like as soon as he signs away the royalties on Please Mr. Kennedy, you're just like, oh well, that's going to be a hit. As stupid as it is, that's definitely going to be something that makes a lot of money.
And that's what I mean when I say his entitlement. Like he thinks he deserves something that he's not getting. He's being offered so much from so many people, but he's just not getting this one thing that he really thinks he deserves. And so therefore he's miserable. But throughout the movie, he's making himself miserable. He's making choices that make him miserable. You see him trudging through the snow in a shot that clearly shows that to the left and right, it's not snowy. You could just not walk through the snow, like throughout the movie, he makes these choices. And
there is definitely a sense of self-sabotage to him. Making like perfect, being the enemy of good, many times over for Llewyn Davis, of course. I would say that there is sort of an, I don't know. It becomes a question: is he unsuccessful because he's an asshole, or is he an asshole because he's unsuccessful? And it very much becomes sort of a
feedback loop.
Yes, an inescapable problem for him.
And I think that's another theme they're playing with because of the way that the story cycles. Because, I mean, that's the opening scene of getting his ass kicked. Like, that's a direct result of being an asshole. And it happens differently the next time it happens, but like, he's
only
just going to keep only slightly, but he's going to keep repeating the same mistakes until he learns to be better.
Yeah. And the Gene character puts a very fine point on that at one time, which we'll need to talk about the Gene character here in a moment. But to get back, I mean, the other thing I'm struck by you talk about like he doesn't get exactly what he wants. The movie doesn't also articulate exactly what he's after, what his version of success would look like. But one of my things,
I think Bob Dylan is a good. Just Bob Dylan.
Oh yeah, of course. Sure, Bob Dylan gets everything I guess he could want. But one of my takeaways from this character is, if you are, say, a musician, and you hold like mainstream audiences in contempt, and the like music industry itself in contempt, and like your peers in contempt, then it doesn't leave you, it leaves you a very narrow needle to thread for whatever some of you could consider success. Like he doesn't want it on any of these terms as far as I can tell. And it doesn't leave him much of an opening to be happy.
I think I just thought of the one other thing that is easy to forget because he's such an asshole. He's also grieving.
Absolutely.
I wonder who he was when his partner was around. I wonder if he was this asshole then. I wonder if all he really wants is to be able to go backwards in time and have his partner back.
I would say, I mean, that it comes as quite a shock, honestly. You know, when you find out his partner, Mike Timlin, killed himself, thrown off the George Washington Bridge, because you're kind of assuming
because it should have been the Brooklyn Bridge.
It should be the Brooklyn Bridge.
That's
obviously.
the shocking part. Yeah.
That's the shocking part.
You're kind of assuming that it's because he was an asshole, you know? Like, he probably fucked that up. And then you hear what actually went down, and you're like, ooh, that would do a number on you. Yeah, that sucks. I wonder what the details of that are. I'm sure they're not great for anyone, really. And not knowing that is provocative as well.
And that's
I will
probably deployed at just the right time in the movie to sort of like, we've started to get enough of a feel for LLEWYN that we're being repelled from him so much that it then halfway through, when we learn that, it pulls us back into some sympathy for him and allows him to then be an asshole a couple more times without us ever fully writing him off to the point of we want him to be beaten to death in that alley.
Well, I mean, you have a naturally charismatic actor like Oscar Isaac is getting a lot of this across, you know. It's funny
you say that. I did not find, like, I remember seeing him in Star Wars and being like, wow, he's charismatic. Who knew?
Oh, really? Interesting. Oh, I've always been.
He's just so unpleasant in everything else I'd seen him in. He's unpleasant in this. He's unpleasant in Drive. What else?
I mean, I guess
he's
he's
stood
in
out
Ex
in
Machina,
Drive.
but I love him. I love him in Ex Machina.
No, I liked him in all of these things. I just didn't know he had, like, I don't know, amiable in him.
I mean, I was struck, like, especially
coming
coming on
with amiable. Actually, I kind of like Poe Dameron's one of his less interesting roles for sure.
Oh, it's less interesting, but it's because amiable was like all he had to play for at least the first movie. But I was struck by, especially on the heels of True Grit, like, the Coens are really, really goddamn good at finding unknowns. Like, that gets obscured a bit because they become so big after they work with the Coen brothers.
Mm-hmm.
But Haley Steinfeld's performance was incredible in that movie, coming out of nowhere. I guess Nick Cage had been around before Raising Arizona, but they did find Frances McDormand for us.
Yeah. Michael Stuhlbarg and
Stuhlbarg was another recent one. Yeah.
Goodman certainly wouldn't be what he was without them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No. Alden Ehrenreich has not really followed up on it that well, but man, coming out of Hail Caesar's like, who is this kid? That's incredible. And I felt that way coming out of the theater of LLEWYN Davis. Like, I don't know if I love that movie, but man, that guy's a hell of an actor.
What was your introduction to him? Was it this? Was it LLEWYN Davis?
I no longer remember if I had seen Drive before this, but this is what put him on the map for me. Like,
it was.
I may have been like, oh, it's the guy from Drive. Yeah, but I may have seen that after this. But this certainly is what put him on my radar.
For me, it was the Ridley Scott Robin Hood film. Actually,
I skipped that one.
He plays King or Prince John in that. He's and he is the big cartoonish villain of the film, and he's
good at cartoonish villain.
He's really good at it. He's a lot of fun. He's probably the person having the most fun in that movie. Helps a lot, So when he shows up, you're like, oh, cool. Kind of doing an Alan Rickman Sheriff of Nottingham thing,
Not having seen that movie, that feels like a low bar.
Oh, it totally is. It's not a very good film, but
well, it doesn't look like anybody else is having fun in it.
No one
Crowe doesn't seem to be.
Everyone's real bummed about that film. Yes, except Oscar Isaac.
Well, everybody's really bummed about this movie too, but to the to the benefit. But talking about the LLEWYN's backstory and all that, I think that gets us to the Jean character, and this is something that's tough for me. Like, I think this is a tough character.
Jesus.
She's like
having fun. She's having a fun performance here.
I don't know. I've heard people say it's such a good performance.
Man.
Yeah. I think it's kind of impossible.
Right. I think. Well, I have a bias. I think Carey Mulligan is a perfect actor, who does everything perfectly. So, but what do you do with this script, with this character?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and listening to her talk behind the scenes, she does such a beautiful job of being like, everything she's doing is because she loves him so much and she thinks so highly of him that she's just furious that he's not meeting his potential. And I'm like, I'm glad you decided that because it's not in the script.
Yeah, that fury though comes out so one-dimensionally, like cartoonishly. She is like supernaturally hateful towards him. Like,
yeah, there's just that one moment right when she's like, "You should get up again at the gaslight.
Yeah.
I put in a good word for you."
yeah,
And it's like, oh, she's a human.
yeah. Well, I can extrapolate from the fact that she slept with him at all, and that actually the line that does it for me is when she says, "I miss Mike." During their sit down at the cafe, and from that I can extrapolate actually an entire backstory for this character and how she related to those two guys, and it makes her a more sympathetic character. And
you can see the younger people they were. You can see, how they came to New York. What the energy was 5 years ago, and how it's curdled. And it's that's, I guess, one of the more overtly tragic things. But it's again not put a fine point on. It's sort of there for your perusal.
Yeah, I mean, in my imagination, she and Mike like were high school sweethearts or dated like initially and were pretty serious, and there was a stretch where LLEWYN was sort of their third wheel and tagging around, but they were a trio having a great time playing gigs, and she was fond of him and like, oh, LLEWYN, when are you gonna get your act together? Blah blah blah. They broke up and she got together with Timberlake, and then Mike ends up killing himself, and then that creates a scenario where, and this, I mean, not going into my own personal history, but I have some like in towards this type of thing, but it creates a scenario where she's now grieving her old lover, but she can't like express that totally openly because it's awkward to do that when you're in a new relationship. And so she's especially resentful of LLEWYN because he gets to sort of wear his grief on Main Street and she has to bury it more. But also they're kind of going through it together, and that's how they end up sleeping together.
That's a fascinating story that is definitely not in the movie.
Exactly.
But I kind of wish it were. Like the story you're describing sounds awesome.
That is a human drama that this movie eschews.
Yeah. Every now and again, I really want to know why they don't give any. Like, I'm okay with not explaining what happened exactly, but just establish the relationships a little bit better.
And I don't know what you would lose by digging, 8 inches more into that. I'm not saying that you need to recenter the entire movie around that, but an actor of Carey Mulligan's caliber can do so much with the line, "I miss Mike." And so if you gave her 3 or 4 more lines, I think you could get a lot of that implicated in a more effective dramatic way. But I guess they're more interested in keeping this in a sort of first person perspective from LLEWYN. And from his perspective, she is just a relentlessly hateful harpy.
Well, I mean, he's not really blaming her for it, is the thing that I note about it, is like he sees the logic in everything she's throwing at his way. She's going to make him pay for the abortion, even though it might not be his, and she's going to be mean about it. But he sees the logic in this. He understands. Yeah. He's like, yeah, well,
it might not be mine, but you do have to do it because of me.
Yes.
And he's also going to turn around and ask her boyfriend for the money for the abortion.
Who he is cucked. Yeah, absolutely.
Dick move after dick move, this guy.
And he's an asshole about it, even after he gives him the gig.
Yeah.
The possibly very high paying, lucrative novelty song gig. And it's interesting to see Timberlake pop up in this and not do a hell of a lot, really.
But what he does, he honestly does perfectly.
There was that window where he was like, well, he's going to be a guy. He's going to be in movies. He's good in movies. And then they just shut it down. I'm not sure what happened exactly. Was it just The Love Guru? Was it just that?
Was that what it was? I thought it was his like sci-fi action movie.
In Time. He couldn't do it on his own. He shouldn't have given up, though. He should have done more supporting roles. He's good in them. I guess he is. Is he Branch? Is that the troll that he plays?
He is Branch.
That's probably pretty lucrative.
Sorry, too. Trolls is one of our greatest franchises of all time.
Really?
I'm avoiding that.
We stand by it.
Do we have 10 minutes for Trolls? What do you think, Al? Can we?
I think
Don't
this is
get me started. I will.
I have Trolls thoughts actually because I watched 45 minutes of one from across the room when I was at Christmas time. But That's
there's a lot more lore than you'd guess.
Yeah, but don't this latest Trolls Band Together bullshit. It's
okay.
No, none of that.
That was the one then that left me completely confused.
It looked like a loser from afar, I'll tell you.
Yeah. We can't do this. Let's talk about somebody else that is a small role in this movie, like Timberlake, but absolutely perfect for what they do.
Oh yeah,
Adam Driver.
Yeah.
This nice recording session scene is one of my favorite things in the entire Coen filmography. It's so beautiful. Oh, I love it so much.
I did not have the time for this one to like actually dig up the script and read the whole thing here, but I would be fascinated to see how on the page you convey the whole outer space thing and try like if there's a way to convey on the page how funny that is, because I have never seen that not get an enormous laugh. I watched this with my stepson who's 14 and not totally interested in all this.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but man, he cracked up during outer space.
This is, look, this is like, I guess he was probably on Girls already at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember him being in this. So it was kind of a thrill when he popped up and I was like, oh, it's him. I didn't even remember. He's like probably fresh out of Juilliard, regardless of where he is in Girls. Pretty close here. This might have been the first thing I ever saw him in, honestly. I don't know at this point, but man, it's so apparent right away that this guy's great. That he's a fascinating actor and a talent doing this silly Al Cody character here, and yeah,
or Arthur Milgram.
Yeah.
Well, just like there's one thing this movie has, I'd say, for as like chilly and like unpleasant as can be in a lot of the broad strokes. It's got so many great, just perfect little moments. Like Gwen nailed the one of him walking through the snow when there's open space on the other side. The bit where he's tasked with he's hauling around his box of unsold solo records, and he's trying to put it under the table and finds that it's already blocked by
Al Cody's
Adam Driver's
unsold records.
That is so great. Or the little moment, I mean, one of the great asshole moments. It doesn't hold a candle to asking Timberlake to pay for the abortion, basically. But when the Troy guy is up on stage saying like, "Oh, there's somebody here who's, I want to bring up," and he's like rolling his eyes, but I didn't bring my guitar, and then he's not even, and he wasn't inviting him up even. Like, what a perfect little asshole moment!
Perfect little asshole moment of, like, people who are just looking for reasons to be put out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
They're exhausted.
then he's more put out when he's not, when it's not the thing that was putting him out. It's like, oh, he wasn't. They weren't asking anything of me. That's even worse, of course.
Yeah, every scene you can kind of count on just one little beat of LLEWYN being an asshole and making things worse for himself and everyone. Just, to about 15% more in every scene that's going to come up, if not more. There's occasional showcase asshole moments, but it's always there, even in the smaller interactions.
Yeah. And that, I think, when I ask myself, what is the difference between LLEWYN and Troy? Because Troy gets the gig with Grossman. Grossman thinks Troy is lovely. And like the one big difference is LLEWYN's an asshole and Troy is like pure as the driven snow. And I wonder to what extent that is part of the messaging of like, you're not doing yourselves any favors if you go around, being a dick to everyone and then expecting them to help you out when you need a place to sleep.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it might to be is they're just sort of presenting different possibilities for what LLEWYN's problem might be. And like what the Troy character as a foil presents is maybe his problem is that he's just not nice enough to people.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That feels a little more facile than what the movie is, how the movie ends up feeling. But
one thing, in my in the ways that this reminds me of myself at a certain point in my life is accurate is I remember when I had I was about late 20s, something like that, and was kind of living in New York with the sort of dawning realization that it wasn't working out. My acting career, after doing pretty well for a while, got a master's degree, been doing a lot of stuff in the Midwest, being somewhat successful, hitting New York, and it's not happening. And it's not happening for, more and more years in a row. That is the biggest asshole I've ever been. I've never been a shittier person than that period of my life. And it's because you're kind of cooking in this soup of just like, it's not happening. It's not coming together. It's not coming together. This thing isn't working. Oh, you're going to do this show? You're going to do are you going to do another bad production of A Midsummer Night's Dream or whatever, a show I've done like 5 times, I think, at this point,
same.
It's like, are you going to do that? Well, if you can get it. And maybe,
Even
worse,
sometimes you don't get
are
those.
you going to miss? Are you going to lose that one?
Sometimes you don't get those too. Right. And it becomes, as you say, a feedback loop. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it feels impossible to succeed. So, why are you working so hard to succeed? And it's something you have to crawl out of ultimately. I mean, it's a bit
the
of
disappointment, the resentment, all builds. Yeah. And because you're like raking yourself over the coals to get this part that you don't necessarily even want, only to have it go to somebody who like, what, who, why?
Yep.
Yeah. I guess that's one of the things I was kind of getting at earlier is one of the cautionary tale aspect of this to me is if you're in a position like that where you're going to be pissed off if you get this thing, and you're going to be even more pissed off and crushed if you don't get it, then you're just you put yourself in a no-win situation. Maybe you should, ship out to sea at that point.
I love that. It's just like, fuck this. I'm going to be a merchant marine. That's so great. That's sort of like the French Foreign Legion or something. It's just like, I need a cessation from all responsibilities and expectations of life.
But it's also like, and this is maybe, in the 21st century, as we get deeper into it, it also feels like, well, yeah, he's a starving artist scraping to get by, but he also always has a good high-paying job to fall back on, basically, if he wants it. I mean, I don't know that Merchant Marine's that high-paying, but he could subsist on it. And it's so reliable that he can take it entirely for granted and choose to sleep on people's couches until he decides to sleep on a ship.
He's certainly taking a lot for granted. I feel like the merchant marines have got to suck, but like it is a privilege nonetheless to just have that there, like pay your dues, which he doesn't. And just, you have a job whenever you want one.
Yeah, that feels like such a luxury in 2020s,
Well, sure. They still have merchant marines. I presume you're on a boat the whole time. You're not really in a position to go do sets in the Greenwich Village.
Oh yeah, that's
I doubt it's fun work, but it's work.
And that's probably. I mean, that's why it's that. I guess it's clearly a job that he could not do while moonlighting at this other thing.
I'm also fascinated at like who was his father. Like he's clearly so proud of his service, and the guy at the Merchant Marines is like, I can't believe you're this guy's son.
He was a sailor himself.
They refused to fill in the background on all this stuff. It's sort of left for implication, and I think that having actors like Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan allows them to, it's there, it's felt, it's real. You just don't know the details. I actually think that's really effective for what they're going for here, personally. But again, I don't know. It is ultimately a movie about assholes.
Well, there's also the relationship with his sister.
She's great.
She's good. She's not necessarily on Carey Mulligan's level as a performer, but there's just some perfect writing beats in those interactions.
There are.
You talk about your father that way?
That he exists. What a great line. I love that. Is that what we do outside of show business? Like that's
yeah,
that's a good one.
And again, he's like, he's so put out that she cleaned out their parents' house on her own, clearly. And she's like, I saved you this box. And he's like, throw it on the curb. And the moment he needs his Merchant Marines pilot's license, whatever it is, he's like, why would you do that? He's such a dick.
Right.
I keep feeling like I have to defend Lewin because I think that this form of assholery, well, first off, mostly hurts himself, but is also it's an externalization of pain, or at least it seems to me. It is all just like, feeling the loss, feeling the oppression of this his failed life choices that become cascading and making himself it worse for himself over and over and over again. Happens in every goddamn scene. It's just crushing. This is honestly, like the scenes with the gore finds. He behaves like a total asshole there, but it is to a purpose, which is that he is ashamed. Like, he hates relying on people for a place to crash, and so he makes them out to be assholes.
I don't know. Like, it's not that unheard of to sing for your supper, like the fact that he has to turn that into, like, there's a way to communicate his boundaries that is polite and honors the fact
he's
that
never going to
they have an open right.
Yeah. In that interaction, he's more specifically triggered by the grief to have the outburst he does.
But then, of course, I'm not even sure, though. I think that to some extent he's leaning into that. Part. I think he's leaning into that.
I think it's probably I think we should always be considering the grief, like, underlying all of this for sure. But what the rant he goes on is, people pay me to do this, and I'm not going to dance for you like a monkey because I'm worth more than that.
Well, he says it the most perfectly asshole way, which is, "This is how I pay the rent," which of course he doesn't. Like, he's here because he doesn't pay rent. But no,
they're an interesting couple because they sort of have they appear to be like collecting artists a little bit. They seem perfectly nice, but
but they suck odd. Also.
They
Oh yeah, but they're not doing him any harm. Like, they're collecting them, but they don't seem to be leeching off them in any way. They're providing him a lot more than he's providing them, by estimation. The other funny part is when she storms out and he's like, "Well, she doesn't need to leave. Obviously, I'm gonna leave." That's
very funny. Yeah. Where's the scrotum, Lewin?
And the things that like the little bits that bring us back to the LLEWYN character, in addition to just Oscar Isaac's natural charisma, but it stops him hating him entirely. Even towards the end, when he's back with the Gore finds and he's apologizing to her, and it feels sincere about when he's apologizing to her, and that's, again, like, we talk so much about what an asshole LLEWYN is. I don't come out of this movie hating him exactly, and it's little moments like that are why. Yeah,
pity is the appropriate reaction to LLEWYN, I think.
Harsher in some ways, I guess, than hating, but
he'd hate that. LLEWYN would hate that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I do think we see him grow ever so slightly in this film.
Okay, so
very slight.
That's a good way to get us to the actual, like, closing sequences, though. And
well, we have a Chicago trip to talk about, sir.
We haven't even gotten into the road trip.
Oh, we talked about Ed for Abraham a little bit, but we didn't talk about Goodman.
Yep.
Who is apparently a stand-in for what's his name? The guy, the author, the guy who wrote True Grit.
Oh,
Charles Portis? What?
Yeah, that I read somewhere.
Was he a musician?
No, but that Goodman's character Roland is modeled after Portis.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like Dr. John or some New Orleans jazz guy that I didn't know anything about, other than I think that's the name of a New Orleans guy.
It is.
It looks like just. I mean this not nearly as dismissively as it sounds, but I looked at it as the script just says, and then John Goodman comes in and does a John Goodman thing at him for 10 pages or so. And like, he and the Coen brothers relationship is so locked in at this time that they can just kind of do that. It's like, we're going to have John come and do his Goodman thing. And that'll give our movie some lift up the sag in the middle this movie might otherwise have.
The decision to have this sort of interlude in the middle that's completely like its own little short film is so fascinating. What's his name? Garrett. Hedlund.
Garrett Hedlund. This was kind of at the moment when Garrett Hedlund was like, he was like popping. Like he's on the poster for this movie. He's this was the moment for Garrett Hedlund, a little bit after his starring role in Tron. And you kind of were hearing, you know who's actually really talented? Garrett Hedlund. And
it's so metatextual how the cop just comes and summarily removes him from the movie the way that President of Hollywood just summarily removed Garrett Hedlund from movies in 2014.
Yeah, that's an odd beat. It becomes surreal for me. Everything with this entire road trip becomes very, very, like how much of this is real? How much of this is supposed to take seriously? I guess all of it, but it seems inexplicable.
Are the lights of Akron really like right there off of that you can see off the exit, or is it just a symbolic Akron that he is not turning off into? It's
very much, It feels like a dream. It delivers us to F. Murray Abraham, of course, which is sort of the crux of the film in a lot of ways. But like, it's Goodman just going for it here. It really does feel like we're just going to turn the camera on him, and he's going to talk about Santeria voodoo magic.
He's going to talk about bullshit. It's fine.
Yeah, I actually love that because it's just like you're gonna wonder why your life turned to shit for no reason, and it's just like, well, I mean, that it's probably will happen. Shit. Yeah. But just having him go off. His it's the scene where we find out Mike Timlin killed himself, and Goodman's immediate reaction is just like, "Why did he use the George Washington Bridge? The Brooklyn Bridge?
Pretty fucking stupid."
Yeah, fantastic. He kind of carries this sequence. Obviously, as he is wont to do. It's pretty great. I imagine Roland Turner is a difficult person to share a car with. I imagine he smells odd, especially after a heroin trip or whatever. It is heroin, right? I mean, he's a massive junkie, and I love his exit of the film. It's just gets abandoned in the car with the cat, and we have no idea what happens.
That was another dick move, leaving the cat. Ugh.
Mm-hmm. Well, if Roland Turner were to die in the car, the cat would
be
able to eat
well
him.
fed.
Would have meal,
yeah, and if not, presumably Roland Turner will let him out. So, actually,
or
quite perspicacious.
Capture him and use him for Santeria purposes, because now he thinks that Johnny Five and Lewin both abandoned him, and he's got a lot of revenge to plot.
But they do capture really well that, like, when you're on like a really, really too fast road trip that you have to just drive shifts, and especially driving through the snow at night, it's such a mesmerizing, like it's a strange, surreal experience, and they capture that really well for this.
Yeah,
random little.
Well, that's
interlude.
Okay. And that also sort of starts dragging us back towards the ending, and how, like, for as much we're talking about how this is such a more grounded portrayal of the music scene and what it is to struggle as an artist, and it's not willing to bend to the conventions of a rise and fall arc or whatever. The ending of the movie especially takes it to this like sort of metaphysical place where it is. And I think this helps the movie. This, for as much as we're saying this movie can be kind of a drag to watch scene to scene, and that it's not the most pleasant thing. I think having this metaphysical bent to the end of it, like, is this some sort of time loop? Is this metaphorical rather than literal? It helps make the movie makes that go down better in some ways, in my mind, than just being a crushing story about a guy who didn't make it even one step.
I mean, he had some albums.
Well, but rather than a parable about a real person who got crushed under the wheels of of folk music capitalism, he is more of it's almost a parable at that point. He's a Sisyphean figure.
I think that's actually, we were talking about how to classify this. I mean, not to be highfalutin, but I think a parable is probably the best thing you could call this, because yes, this is the story of not succeeding, writ large. You can kind of take this and apply it to any version of not succeeding in something that you have passion for. And I love the Dylan appearance at the end here, because I don't know, to me, the sort of meta meaning of that, the significance of that is like, oh, you just missed Bob Dylan. You just missed being Bob Dylan, in a sense. You were at the right place at the right time and the right thing, but just, something was off. You didn't show up at the right moment. You didn't have that song in your back pocket. You did a lot of the same things, but you just weren't quite Bob Dylan, unfortunately, for whatever reason. And that's a thing, that's just how it is sometimes, most of the time, in fact, that you're not Bob Dylan.
That's what you take away from the Bob Dylan.
That's what I take away from it. I think there's other things you could, but that's that for me. That's what it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I could look at this, and if I was just being as literal minded as possible about like what do the plot beats suggest happens after the credits roll here, like I could look at it as more hopeful, like because what Bob Dylan heralds there is an explosion of the folk scene as well, and
sure. Mm-hmm.
So maybe because LLEWYN fucked up so bad that he couldn't even ship out like he's supposed to, maybe he does stick around in spite of himself after he tried to quit to see that boom kind of turn his fortunes around.
The cyclical beatings suggest that's not going to be the case for him, but
right. That's the problem with viewing it literally, is because it goes so explicitly into metaphysical, whatever, parable territory. It's a little harder to sell myself on that being the thing, because the alternative, if you think that maybe he does ship out too, then it becomes this like the folk music equivalent of The Mist. Like if you had held on for literally one more week, that scene is about to explode, and even someone as self-defeating as LLEWYN could not completely fight against the rising tide of commercial opportunity that represents him.
That would be very on brand, sign away the royalties to please Mr. Kennedy, just as it's hitting, skip out on being in Peter, Paul, and Mary. That would be him in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Like I definitely don't leave this movie thinking like things are going to turn around for old LLEWYN Davis right after the credits roll.
No, but the Bob Dylan appearance suggests that to me in a weird way, even though you're right. The tone and the feel of the movie all say that can't be correct.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the Bob Dylan thing is really just driving home like exactly how arbitrary fame is. Again, like you can be super talented, super smart, super good looking, all of the things. It's a matter of like random chance, time and place. And like also maybe if you weren't being a dick to this woman's husband who's just defending his wife, you wouldn't have gotten your ass beat. Like if you hadn't talked back to him, maybe you wouldn't be on the ground, right?
Well, maybe you'd be inside hearing Dylan perform and being blown away by it, and maybe you have a drink with him afterwards, and
or something.
And from there.
And is it that night or the night before that like supposedly the Times is there?
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's unclear which night's which to a certain degree too, but
right.
But also, if the Times was there the night before, that's the night that he really made an ass of himself by screaming about how much he hates folk music.
For Mix and Grandma Moses. Yeah. Well, I think what really underlines probably your interpretation being the correct one about how arbitrary it is that, Dylan has it and LLEWYN doesn't, is the difference there. The character growth we see in LLEWYN from the start to the finish to the end is at the end he plays the song that he used to harmonize with Mike on.
Yeah.
So he's taken whatever step that allows him to perform that song again, and that song is Fare Thee Well. And then Dylan sits down and starts playing a song that's called Farewell. Like it's like almost the exact same thing. It's not the same song, but it's like they had a vast library of Dylan songs and folk or other folk standards to choose from, and that's what they landed on.
Yeah. No, I think that was entirely on purpose. Like he had a slightly better version of the song.
It's a black comedy to some extent, for sure. There's definitely, sort of a dark irony to to most of the things that happen to him, and that's certainly part of it. I've read there's some structural, like people aren't clear what the hell's going on with the beatings. Like I've seen some interpretations that it actually is a flashback, or rather that they're showing us the end of the movie first.
That's what I thought too, but it's not.
It's not right. Yeah.
The dialogue is just slightly different, I believe.
Slightly different. Like the fact that he sings the second song is different.
Well, but they could have just cut around that in the opening, I guess, is one interpretation of it.
But like you see him walk off the stage and he's like, Mikey used to play that song. And in the beginning, it's just Hang Me. So yeah, these little tiny differences. And
I definitely take it to be that he's just getting his ass kicked again. And it's sort of one of those things that keeps happening to LLEWYN.
It can't be two separate instances where twice in 1 week, two different women from Middle America he heckled and their husbands when he got there. And even it did, like he would have a reaction to that, like this. What? How does this? It'd be like Die Hard 2. The same shit happened to the same guy twice.
Right. I think it's more like representing the metaphysical, like Sisyphean. I really hate that word, Sisyphean, but it's
a good one. I like it.
I want to say Sisyphean.
We could say the Groundhog Day aspect if you feel better.
You know what I mean. Jeff says that man pushes his boulder up a hill.
Yes.
LLEWYN is going to continue to like get his ass kicked for being an asshole.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
For sure that. Like it's nothing much is going to change until, well, nothing much is going to change. You got to break the pattern or something. He doesn't seem equipped to do that at this time.
Tie back some stuff I said earlier about, I was trying to figure out like, what is this? Because we got to a point in the Coen-Oscopy where it was starting to see the patterns repeat themselves more. Yeah. And, we sort of talked about, at how amusing it is to me that Raising Arizona and No Country for Old Men have essentially the same ending, but just to two totally different ends. And I got to this point, I think, when LLEWYN Davis first came out, where I was starting to recognize some of the Coen trademarks. And I felt like, everything at the time, like, okay, this is not that different than the ending of a Serious Man, where you have this sort of supernatural figure of retribution bearing down on the hero at the end. And maybe that's like sort of a divine punishment for giving up like his moral stance just when things were finally looking up. Gene got him this gig. The Dylan thing is suggesting that if you hang on a little longer, there might be more opportunities too. And as soon as he gives up, then a tornado shows up, or this, shadowy figure in an alley shows up to give him what we all agree is, if not divine, it feels sort of otherworldly in its level of
he's faceless and shadowy.
But that's the other thing we talk about is what makes us stand out so much from other movies about arts and artists, is that this is ultimately kind of a movie about giving up, which is an unusual topic for art. And particularly, it seems like art about making art, or movies about movies and all that. Like there is a self-selecting aspect of, well, the people who would give up on making movies are never going to actually finish making the movie about giving up on making movies. So the people who make the movie and release the movie are going to be the people who are going to be attracted to the message of, if you keep trying, you will succeed eventually. And
sure.
The Coens buck that trend with this. But that also makes it, I think, it gives it a kinship to No Country for Old Men, which is another movie where the hero struggles against the inherent brutality of the world and ultimately just throws in his hand in the face of it.
I like that. I do think I don't know that this lands in a place where he is quitting per se. Like, it is unverified, if he actually ships out with the Merchant Marines. And the nature of the thing kind of suggests to me that he persists in this fashion for a while. That he may ultimately have a bad end. I mean, he seems, headed in that direction. But the main thing that is going on is that this is that he is on sort of an endless march through this depressive episode. That he is ensorcelled in.
The question that begs to me is, do you think that is a more hopeful interpretation than he just keeps pushing the boulder up the hill endlessly?
I do believe
him quitting music for good and breaking the cycle. Is that more hopeful than pushing the boulder up the hill and never getting anywhere?
Well, I think it does it finds the lane between the two, essentially, in that we're not sure if he quits. You know, I mean, it seems inevitable that it will eventually happen, but he doesn't want to. Really, he doesn't really want to be a merchant marine. That's sort of a fuck you, you know. And there's an appeal in that, but obviously, that's not going to make him happy exactly. And so, you know, I think he persists in Twilight here for a while. Is my take on it. I mean, it certainly seems to be the direction things are headed. Suicide sort of is a thing that is dancing around the edges of this film. It's never really, you know, beyond what happened with Mike Timlin. Yes, for sure. But really what that does is all about LLEWYN. Is LLEWYN suicidal is the question. And I think ultimately he is not.
No, I think au revoir is not the ending line if that is what the character is. Like,
but he is depressive. And that's not changing based on anything that happened in this film. Like he's going to be, you know, in this place for the immediate future.
Right.
Does that mean it's the same ending as Barton Fink then, where it's the struggling artist trapped in a limbo state, kind of unable to produce the work that will free him from these torments?
I think it's a little bit less dark, you know, than Barton Fink. Like, you know, I don't think he's surrounded by flames by any means.
No, it's ice. He's in the bottom circle of hell is being frozen in ice, actually.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
it's a very different purgatory.
The seasons will change, and we know that. You know,
but the struggle is eternal,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like I said, there's teeny tiny bits of growth that somehow get him to sing that song again, or help him to remember not to let the cat out the door. Like those tiny little differences, but otherwise, like that's life. Like if you want to make art, you have to struggle, and that's just what it is.
Maybe next time he'll have the horn of Eld.
Oh,
joke for
I don't
five
think
people.
it's trying to get.
I see what you're
deeper
doing
than that.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that for what would be my final thought on this then, what that brings out to me is that what strikes me, for as much as this movie's tone is depressing and like scene by scene, it does make an unusually strong case for why pursuing arts is not worth it, and you should consider quitting and all that. And like I said, it's a tough watch scene by scene, and yet I have found over the years the movie becomes less depressing and a little more, I guess, optimistic the more distance I have from actually sitting down and watching it. Because over time, as the particularities of how LLEWYN's an asshole in this scene versus that scene fade, what lingers is how good the music is. How that, like, his talent is worth remembering for its own sake. And that maybe, like, the act of pushing up the boulder up the hill becomes more noble the more distance you have from actually doing it.
Yeah, I think
It's true.
I think the music itself, and you see in him so much of the weight is lifted when he's singing. So I don't think the ultimate message is like, it's not worth the struggle. It's just like, it comes with struggle.
The struggle's real.
The struggle is more real than most stories show you. And like, it is depressing in a lot of ways, but also I don't know. I think I do see some tiny glimpses of hope. Like, I hadn't watched this movie since I first saw it because I was at the time a struggling artist, and I was like, I can't put this in my brain any more than it is there now. And on Brett Goldstein's film podcast, when he asked, I think it was Nish Kumar, what's the scariest movie you've ever watched? He said Inside Llewyn Davis, because the idea of this being your life as a struggling artist is so terrifying. And watching it this time, I was prepped for that in my heart. But when I realize how much of it seems to be sending the message of like the way you go through the struggle, to me, my worst nightmare is not being a failed artist as much as it is being someone who lets that turn you into something so ugly. Like that lets all that resentment make you a shitty human being. That's the nightmare. And I think because it seems like he grows ever so slightly, there's hope.
Well, and I guess one way of looking at it would be, it sucks if sort of mainstream or whatever commercial success in the arts is randomly distributed and you never draw the long straw. But that only becomes a tragedy, like a real tragedy, if in addition to not succeeding commercially, you allow that to embitter you to the point where you ruin all of your personal relationships to go with it. Like, and you get the worst of both worlds.
I like that very much. I mean, if you want to get down to brass tacks,
I do.
This is ultimately why I quit acting. why I got out of this life is because I didn't like the person it was making me. You know, I certainly liked the creative endeavor part of it. That was really satisfying. I miss it to this day, but I didn't like the person it was making me. I didn't like the compromises I was making and the reaction I was having to those compromises. You know, it was interfering with personal relationships, and you know, the more I stepped back and focused on those, the happier I was. And you know, there were a lot of other takeaways. There's still creative outlets. There's still creative, you know, things I do. This podcast is one of them, frankly. You know, there are and there probably always will be. You know, I don't think I could not do that. But you know, once the failure becomes the defining part of it, then it's not worth doing anymore.
I think one of the secrets to being a person who is an artist in your heart, and the world makes it really, really hard to be that thing, like finding the part of it that does bring you joy, that does make you feel fulfilled and make you feel like your most authentic self, that part of it you can find in other places. So either focus on that part of it while you're doing it, or go get that part of it somewhere else, I think is a really, really, really important thing for artists to like have in mind, that like the fame part is not why you're here. And if it is, then it's not worth it. But finding the joy, whatever it is that gives you joy, you can find that on the smallest stage or even in a different endeavor.
Yeah. Joy is sparse on the ground in this movie. But the next one we're going to look at, Hail Caesar, finds a lot more joy in the silliness of producing films. I don't remember. I recall liking this one better than that one, but we'll find. I haven't revisited since. Maybe. Yeah, maybe now's the time.
This is a bit of a blank one for me. I've seen it once, and I'm just like, what was going on in that film again? I don't know.
All kinds of stuff.
I think it's
There's
good.
a kidnapping.
It's all over the place, if I recall. Yeah, but there's definitely hilarious stuff in there. Would that it were so simple and such.
You're right. It does. In memory, it does feel like there's 7 or 8 different strands of movies in there that I couldn't quite sort out. Perhaps you and I, John, having now done 14 of these in a row, we have, 16. Deciphered the keys. We have the clues we need to draw the lines through it and make that one finally make sense in the context of the Coens overall thing.
Yeah,
maybe. Let's be optimistic for this moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the next one. Hail Caesar. As we wind this down, we're getting to the end of it. All right. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Gwen, for joining us for this fascinating conversation, for me at least.
Thank you.
LLEWYN Davis.
I was just speculating about a hypothesis. I know I don't know nothing.
Uncertainty. That is appropriate for matters of this world.
There. We're in a tight spot.